The Royal Secret. A Legend from Ireland. Chapter 1. Brian's Promise. Long ago, there was a king in Ireland called Lebraith. He had a lot of red hair. It looked like a red bush. During the day, he could not keep his crown on his head. Sometimes it fell to the floor. At night, he could not sleep well because his hair was a problem. In the summer, his head was very hot and he scratched it a lot. One morning in May, the king woke up and said,
"I want to cut my hair immediately. I think I have fleas. Call a barber."
Your Majesty,
said his adviser.
why don't you wait until July?
"I can't wait.
Said the king.
Fleas are eating my head. Call a barber."
Very well.
Said his adviser.
I'll find a barber.
All the barbers in the country heard the news and they were frightened. No one wanted to cut the king's hair.
The last barber who cut King Lebraith's hair disappeared,
Said a young man.
All of King Lebraith's barbers disappeared.
Said an old man.
I remember poor Finn, and young Gawain and others.
The king's men found a young barber named Brian. They took him to the castle and gave him a pair of scissors. The king took him to a small secret room and shut the door. Then he sat down in a big chair in front of a mirror.
"Start cutting my hair,
Said the king.
but be very careful."
"Yes, Your Majesty."
Said Brian. Brian took the scissors and started cutting the king's red hair. King Lebraith looked at Brian's face in the mirror in front of him.
"This young barber will soon be very surprised."
Thought the king. And the king was right. Suddenly, Brian saw the king's ears and he cried out. His scissors fell to the floor.
"Well,
Said the king.
what did you see?"
Nothing, Your Majesty."
Said Brian quietly.
"I'll ask you again.
Said the king.
What did you see? Answer me."
"Well, I saw your ears."
Said Brian.
"And what are they like?"
Asked the king.
"They're like the ears of a horse."
Said Brian.
"Yes, I have ears like a horse.
Said the king.
Now, finish your work, then my men will take you away, because you know my secret."
"But I won't tell anyone."
Cried Brian, who was very frightened.
"I promise, Your Majesty, I'll never say a word to anyone."
"I'm sorry,
Said the king.
but my people mustn't know my secret. If they do, they will laugh at me. Finish cutting my hair, and then take your scissors and go with my men. We'll send you to a lovely island far away, and you'll be very happy."
"But I don't want to go far away."
Said Brian. When he finished cutting the king's hair, the king's men came and took poor Brian to prison. That evening, an old woman went to see the king. He sat on his throne with a big hat on his head. "Good evening, Your Majesty," said the woman. "I'm Brian's mother. I'm very unhappy because you took my son away. Brian is my only son, and he helps me with my work in the house and on the farm. My husband is dead, and I am alone in this world. Please don't take Brian away from me." The king was a good man, and he listened to the woman with interest. "Are you a good king or a bad king?" asked the woman.
We love our king, but does he love his people?
He smiled at her and said,
Very well. Let me think about this.
The next day, King Lebraith went to see Brian in prison.
You're free, Brian,
Said the king.
but you must never tell anyone about my secret. No one. Do you promise?
Yes, Your Majesty.
Said Brian.
I promise.
Chapter 2. The Willow Tree. Brian was happy when he went home, but he always thought about the king's secret, day and night. He became sad and tired, and he ate very little. Soon he was weak and could not work. His mother called a doctor. The doctor listened carefully to Brian's story about the secret.
Young man,
Said the doctor.
you must tell me the secret, or you won't get well. This secret is too big for you.
You don't understand.
Said Brian.
I promised the king to keep the secret. I can't tell anyone.
Well,
Said the doctor.
then take your secret to the forest. Stand by the old willow tree and shout your secret. No one will hear you, only the trees.
Brian listened to the doctor. The next morning he went to the forest. He stood next to the willow tree, but he could not say a word. At last he whispered,
Our King Lebraith, he has ears like a horse.
Suddenly Brian felt well. He was happy and jumped up and down in the forest. Then he shouted,
He has ears like a horse. Great big horse's ears. King Lebraith has horse's ears.
Brian laughed loudly.
Woo!
He was a new person and went back home. After a few months, there was a strong wind in the forest. The leaves of the willow tree whispered something. Then the grass and the flowers whispered something. The people listened to the wind. Listen, said one woman to her friend. The wind is saying something. You're right, said her friend. It's saying, the king has horse's ears. The king has horse's ears.
I can hear it too,
Said a little boy, and he laughed. He looked at the woman and her friend, and they all laughed together. The secret was out, and everyone knew it. But no one told the king. King Lebraith liked music, but one day his favourite musician broke his harp.
There's going to be an important banquet soon,
Thought the musician.
I need a new harp. I must go to the forest and find a good piece of wood for my new harp.
The musician went to the forest and looked at all the trees. He stopped in front of the willow tree.
This is the perfect wood for my new harp.
He thought. He cut a piece of wood from the willow tree and made a new harp. On the day of the banquet, the musician began playing it. The music was lovely, and the king was pleased. Everyone listened to the sweet music of the new harp. But there was something else in the music, a strange whisper. It said, "The king has horse's ears. The king has horse's ears." The people at the banquet heard this and were very surprised. Suddenly, They all started laughing and laughing, and they could not stop. Some people fell to the floor and could not stop laughing,
What's happening here?
shouted King Lebraith angrily. He was very angry because everyone was laughing at him, and he did not know what to do.
Well,
Thought Lebraith.
I can laugh with them, or I can cry alone.
He decided to laugh with his people, and everyone was happy. After the day of the banquet, King Lebraith called all his advisers to the great hall.
I want to change some things in this country.
Said the king. His advisers were surprised and looked at each other.
First, all the barbers who are in prison can go home.
Said the king.
Second, there will be no secrets. I want my people to know the good news and the bad news. I want to be a good and honest king.
King Lebraith became a great king, and his people loved him. When he saw the children in the town, he stopped and talked to them. Then they ran home and shouted happily,